who's spoken several times here, Matoi Monroe, and also from Erin Gonzalez, who is one of the staff people for Bagley, Boston Area Gay and Lesbian Youth, who meet here on Wednesday evenings. Erin Gonzalez and Matoi both told us we should hear from Jean-Luc. And we're so glad to welcome you this morning, Jean-Luc. I will read his paragraph. On January 21, 2016, the Obama administration awarded $48 million to relocate the Isle of Jean-Charles Band of Biloxi, Chitimacha, Choctaw Indians due to rising sea levels disintegrating their traditional homeland. The Louisiana tribe became the first climate change refugee community, but were not isolated in impact by climate change. In solidarity with all impacted nations, Jean-Luc shares his story of post-Katrina and indigenous perspectives on the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. Jean-Luc Pierite is a member of the Tunica-Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, president of the board, NICOB, North American Indian Center of Boston. Thank you for being with us, Jean-Luc. We welcome you here.
Remind people, please turn off your cell phones if you haven't done it already.
So I want to start off, as we usually do, first of all, a recognition of the indigenous territory of which we are on right now. Of course, the Massachusetts tribe, their original indigenous territory, but I also live near Jamaica Pond, which I found to be the summer camp of figures like Good Jamaican and Josias Wampatuck. I go about and I have this relationship with the land. I can put my hand down and I can feel the reverberations of the steps of the people that have been here for centuries. I can listen to the language of the wind in the trees and the bird song giving testimony to the people that were here. And so it is important for us, as me being a guest here in this territory, especially not just Massachusetts, but the Wampanoag Nation as well, and the Nipmuc Nation as well, and all of the tribes that have been here and persisted. Thank you for letting me into your home. And allowing me the time and space that I need to say what I have to say. Tangentially, on Jamaica Pond, there is a memorial for Francis Parkman. And this memorial, if you ever walk the pond, you'll see across the way there's a long granite bench and a medallion where the bust of Francis Parkman is sort of emblazoned on this memorial, and who he is. I'm a little bit thrown off because the actual kind of focus of this memorial is this monolith that comes out of it, and from the monolith there's a figure that's emerging. So I'm going around. I'm like, oh my goodness, is this to mark the people that are here or whatever. And I go to the Jamaica Plain Historical Society, and he's only identified as a quote forest Indian, and that copy is repeated on Harvard University's Arnold Arboretum page. And so I hope that people that are viewing this, anybody that's active with HUNAP or anybody that can get their voice out, we need to figure out, we have to go beyond the sort of, fantasy of who we are, composites of who we are. We have to give people, their humanity and their dignity and their identity as such. I am new to this land, but I am not. I'm preceded by my ancestors by the way of what's known as the Tunica treasure. And this is the largest, at the time it was the largest collection of Indian trade goods and human remains that was to be repatriated back to our homeland. But for about 10 years prior to me being born, it stayed up here at the Peabody Museum, and it took an effort. I mean, there was many parties, sort of like, there was the amateur archaeologists that dug everything up. There was the state of Louisiana, and here we are, a state-recognized tribe at the time, working on federal recognition. We had to get to the task of repatriating the proof of who we are that we say we are. And so this is, and it was here. And I had found out within the last month, because of the speaking engagement from Winona LaDuke, I shared that story with her during the Q&A session. She says, oh yeah, I was in undergrad at Harvard, and I worked with Jeffrey Peabody Brain, and I cataloged that. And I was like, for all of my life, I had such a, oh, Harvard. They had all of my people's goods there. And to know that Winona LaDuke helped to catalog it. It just gave me a sense of peace that her hands kind of, helped preserve and work. So yes, thank you, Dick and Dean, and Community Church of Boston for having me here. I am the board president at the North American Indian Center of Boston. Oh yeah, I'm Jean-Luc Pierite. I'm Jean-Luc Pierite. I'm from the Tunica-Biloxi tribe, but I am board president at the North American Indian Center of Boston. We're coming up on 50 years of service, combined with the history of the Boston Indian Council and NACOB. We have two programs. One that's wrapping up, but we're going to be continuing the services for our women that are affected by domestic violence and sexual assault. But that program is Circles of Support. We are finishing up a resource guide for women that are affected by domestic violence and sexual assault. And we'll be doing the work of holding community meetings and doing the distribution of that resource guide. We also have our WIOA program. A bit of news for that. We hired a new director for the Department of Employment and Training. Her name is Michelle Hughes. She was the project manager of MSPI, Tribal Action Plan, manager of Title 4E, all at Mashpee. She has a long track record of successfully leading nonprofits, a wealth of experience working to develop and implement long-term planning. So with this dynamic new addition to our team, we feel very positive for the year coming ahead. So the title of my presentation is Climate Change and the Resilience of Native American Coastal Communities. This is a talk and part of the experience that I've had. 2 years ago, I received a copy of an invitation from my friend Robert Caldwell, who's a member of the, I believe he was on the council at the time, but he's a member of the Choctaw Apache in Sewali, Louisiana. It's a state-recognized tribe working on their federal petition. But he said, look, you're the federally recognized guy. You can go down to Washington, D.C., and it's a consultation with the State Department on the enhanced mechanism for the rights of indigenous people. The focus of that consultation was the impact of climate change, and I believe there was also talk about free, prior, and informed consent and the importance of that to our peoples. And so at that meeting, being sent by a member of a state-recognized tribe in Louisiana, I looked back and I said, well, what is the impact of climate change, not just for me personally or my tribe, but for our tribes in our region? And the one that stuck out for me was the story of the Ile de Jean Charles band of Biloxi Chitimacha. This community, there's about 100 residents, over 36 households. And since 1955, they've lost 95% of their traditional indigenous territory. These are islands that are off the coast of Louisiana, and it kind of alludes to something that I'm going to talk about a little later on in the presentation, but because of the severe coastal erosion problem that we have, every 15 minutes in Louisiana, a football field of land goes underwater. And so this is a community that was on the front line of that and lost 95% of their land. There was probably over 20,000 acres, and now they're down to a few hundred. And so in 2016, 2 years ago today, the Obama administration awarded this community, after 13 years of persisting, to get that funding to move their community further inland. They received that award of $48 million. And within the last month, after 2 years of searching, so not only 13 years of trying to get the money, but now 2 years of going through the state process of identifying the actual site where the tribe is going to go, they have found a 515-acre sugarcane farm, which will then be developed and provide a new home close to other tribal communities that would be able to assist. And so then there's just a reasonable flood risk profile for that area. But the concern is, with 100 residents, three dozen households, they feel like, where they're going, there's a possibility that there'll be too many homes for the members. And so what would be the ramifications of bringing outsiders from the community and the dilution of cultural just cohesion? So
enough of that.
yeah, so there's the good, but then there's the cautiously optimistic side to this story. I also wanted to address another development in Louisiana. So Sherry Feuchtlin from Old Louisiana spoke at yesterday's Women's March. And thank you to all of the women, especially the indigenous women that participated in this second annual march. But she spoke at the Women's March in New Orleans, and Bold, Louisiana, Sherry Feuchtlin, they're embroiled with the Bayou Bridge pipeline. This is, if we harken back to 2016 again, remember just the scenes coming out of Standing Rock. This is the final leg of Standing Rock. I mean, not Standing Rock, the Dakota Access Pipeline. Thank you. So this, within the last month, Sherry had bought a piece of land in Rain, Louisiana, which was along the proposed path of this pipeline. And so they brought in the Takapaishak Nation to do a ceremony and blessing so that the water protectors, in a prayerful way, can do the work which they do. This is how we frame it: it's prayer, it's protection. The water is life. It's not just something to put on a T-shirt, but it is as an affirmation of a sacred duty that we have to protect all of our resources in our land. And so they bought that land. They set up camp. She's out talking in the women marches and everything, getting out in the streets and being active. But then also within last week, a suit was filed in the state of Louisiana court. Basically, the Bayou Bridge LLC, there's a contention that they worked as a public entity to go through the process of eminent domain to get the land to put this pipeline through Louisiana. And so this coalition is putting together, trying to get any scrap of paper they can, any communication they can to kind of piece together what it is, Bayou Bridge LLC, but at the root of it, Energy Transfer Partners, what they were up to. And on top of that, if that was not enough, at the end of the summer, state of Louisiana denied the license application for Tiger Swan to operate within the state. This is the private mercenary firm that basically conducted the violence against our water protectors at Standing Rock. Even though that was denied at the end of the summer, Tiger Swan is still going through the appeals process. And so that's something that needs to be addressed, and we're still trying to keep them at bay. So if you would like to learn more about that process, go to boldlouisiana.org. They have a donate button. I'm sure they would appreciate the help. But yeah, those are sort of the two kind of hallmarks and actions by our state-recognized tribes, because they're the ones that are on the coastline. They're the ones that are, this is the burden is to all of us, but most of all to them. To have to move your community further inland than 40 miles and become the world's first climate change refugee community, that is astonishing. And it is something that we all need to heed, indigenous people and non-native alike. So, with that said, my family and I, my mom, my sister, and I, we operate as the Tunica-Biloxi Singers and Legend Keepers of Marksville, Louisiana. And for the past 11 years, my family has conducted sort of like weekly language and culture presentations at our casino property. We have an atrium that has a little pond, and there's live alligators there, just little 5-foot babies. And they come from a farm in Natchitoches, Louisiana. We have Terry Rogers come from the alligator park, and he comes out and he feeds them. And there's a recording that says all of the sort of scientific facts about the alligators. But then we come on and we start telling all of our stories and our songs. And we continue this sort of this traditional outreach effort that my family has conducted since the 1950s. So my great-grandfather, who was our last traditional chief, Joseph L.C. Pierite Sr., he would bring his daughters and his son. Back then they would call them the suit. They would wear the regalia and then go out and share the stories, and basically while we're going through this recognition process, make people understand that we're still here, we still exist. And even I've even in doing that and going to elementary school students, trying to impart to them like, who are the Indians? We're not from India.
Right.
We do get those questions. It's like, where is Marksville? Where is the tribal land? We have to make sure that we impress upon all of the members of the community that we still exist. So as part of that tradition, I'm going to share the first line of this story. First in Tunica, and then I'm going to tell you the whole story in English. So, Tachalhaka Katlanach Urish Unisa Ihin Tomusinani. So, this story, there's a certain chief. It's said that there's a certain chief, and he lives in a house where there's no floor. And outside of that house, his two daughters would go outside and they would pound corn. Now, I don't know, how many people know what a pilon is? No? So this is not like medicinal, but there's sort of almost like a stump and they're inside of the stump, there's a curved bowl shape. And the women would have two big sticks and would pound into the pilon, and that's how they would make corn. Do like, you know, all sorts of things with it, like bread or whatever. And if they're doing this, and then they notice a little drop, 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 drop. And there's water, and then they look up, and they see that there's ice that's melting. Well, from that puddle that's now forming in the corn, now there's minnows that are swimming in this puddle. So the chief is, you know, puzzled by all of this. He says, I don't know what's going to happen to our people. So first they send for the elder man of the village. He looks in it and he says, oh, so there's going to be a lot of water and we're going to have a lot of fish to eat. So he decides, okay, I'm going to get a second opinion. So he goes to the elder woman of the village. She says, oh, you're going to have to build a big boat. And you're going to have to put all the people in it, and then it'll be a good thing. And so they built the big boat. Not everybody participated in this process. There were some people that decided no, and they were going to just laugh and sing and dance while this construction is going on. So then the chief then sits down in the boat with the people that built it with him, and then they wait, and the waters come. And while the waters are coming, the people outside the boat are still singing and laughing, dancing. And the waters rise, the boat rises with the waters, and the people that were outside of the boat, they went into the waters and they turned into fish. And so it kind of goes, as other stories I'm sure you would, you know, this is not an adaptation of the Bible story,
Noah.
but yeah, the bird goes out, and then Sister Yushikon, who told this story, you know, there were two birds that went out, but one was the dove, and the word that he used to impart was, that's God's bird, and we don't kill it, or harm it, or anything like that. So the reason why I tell this story is because in the tradition, we don't normally start off with a story, but in the tradition, it's the beginning of all things. And this story is important because of what? First of all, it's not Noah because the animals don't get loaded onto the boat two by two.
They're here
The
first.
people become the fish.
People are last.
People become the fish. Because in our stories, what happens is the animals that get represented, sometimes they can turn into people because in our story tradition, it's all the same. Life is all the same. And so we have that point where the people become the fish. And of course there's the two medicine people. Now, what the elder man said was not wrong. There were fish, just, you know, there was people that got turned